All right, thanks for sticking around for the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh, in for Bob Pompiani tonight. We definitely have a lot to talk about, and we have an all-star cast to do it with. Starting right over here with Chris Adamski from the Trib, Chris Mueller from the Fan, and Brian Batko from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And guys, I want to start with the Steelers here because there is a lot to talk about. We were in the locker room after the game, guys, and it was a very frustrated locker room, Chris. I'll start with you here. Guys are pointing out other guys, very outspoken, Alex Highsmith, Deshaun Elliott, even Cam Hayward to an extent. Are they pointing out one guy, Chris, or do you think they are pointing out multiple people on this defense for their collapse again here the second half of the season?
I'll take it back even a game earlier. That Baltimore locker room was one of the strangest at that point, they're still a 10-5 team, still had control of their destiny for the division. I know they lost a division game, and I know they lost 2 in a row. But that was one of the most somber sort of you could feel the
no one was in there.
Tension building already after just the one loss. They only had one practice in between and lose another game, get blown out 3 times in 11 days. There's something going on in that defense for sure. It's an awkward situation. A lot of the newer guys, it's a veteran defense, though. To have all these communication issues, when you have guys, you can go through the list of how many years experience a lot of these starters have. And some of them are new to the team, but even the Dante Jacksons, the Patrick Queens, the Landon Roberts, you go on and on. There are veterans all over the place. This isn't a young defense at all.
It seems like those new guys are the ones actually speaking out about how unhappy they are, which makes me wonder why the old guard, or they just, hey, we're resigned to this. I mean, 9 figures doesn't get you what it used to on one side of the ball. What is it, about 130, 160 million, if it's the total number committed. But that's supposed to be the side of the ball that keeps them in games against the Eagles or keeps them in games against the Chiefs, allows the offense to do enough to win, keeps them in games against Baltimore, stifles Lamar Jackson. They're getting run over in these games. And it's not just that their defense isn't communicating well. Where is the toughness? Where is what Mike Tomlin, well, I'm a leader of men, I'm a tough guy, we're all tough guys. We are going to be physically stronger and more dominant, and that's going to manifest itself late in a schedule, even against good competition. That's been nowhere to be found. I mean, they're getting run over out there.
And to Adamski's point, yeah, I mean, it wasn't just this past week against the Chiefs where you started to hear some of this pushback from players. I mean, it was going back to the week before Baltimore, Patrick Queen saying guys need to be more accountable, and Alex Highsmith saying we need to have everybody with the want to in this locker room. I hear what you're saying there, Chris, but at the same time, sometimes maybe it's not about the want to. It's about the schematics. It's about not having the right plan to face some of these offenses.
How much time you got? Because I wanted to start with want to, but I thought Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin, but we know it's Mike's defense. We know that's his baby. He and Terrell work in tandem, but really it's Mike gets what Mike wants. Andy Reid looked like he was playing chess, and I don't even know if Mike had the checkerboard out. He might have been trying to play Connect Four out there.
It's every year against the Chiefs that they play them.
Patrick Mahomes
4-0 now, including that one in the playoff, first round. I mean, they get shredded every time.
And here's a stat. I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but he gets the ball out on average quicker against the Steelers than any other team. And the interpretation of that I hadn't even thought of, but it makes sense. His receivers are getting open immediately. If the ball is getting out that quickly, that means the coverages that they're running aren't fooling anybody, and these guys are running to open space. That's an indictment on Mike Tomlin. It's his defense more than it is anything else on this team. That is his side of the ball. That's why he's a head coach in the NFL. To get clowned repeatedly by the best offensive coach is unacceptable, especially in your own building. I don't care if it was a Christmas Day game and people were all in a good mood, were all ebullient because they were opening presents in the morning.
Chris, Deshaun Elliott said this is a week 1 or 2 problem. It's week 17 and 18. How can they fix it? Do they have time to fix this?
You're the little mini bye. I thought it was interesting the day after Christmas, Mike Tomlin called the team in, which you lose 3 in a row. That's not a day to have a day off, really.
Not letting them celebrate Boxing Day. I think that's very offensive to Canadian Steelers fans.
It is crazy, though, that if you go by the stats, you can put a couple of marks on. Of course, the Cincinnati game, they give a lot of points, a lot of yards. They've been one of the worst defenses in the league. The bottom 8, depending on where you draw the line, whether right after the bye, or the Washington game, or the Cincinnati game, they're down there 24, 26 in yardage, points, those teams.
And that's not an arbitrary endpoint because you're picking 2 points in time that are post, bye week. It's it's a trend here at this point.
Yeah, it's not just 1 or 2 things. It's not they've played some good teams. I get it. I mean, even Cincinnati's a good offense, but it's a point here now where it's you can't go into the game thinking the Steelers have the better defense, which you thought you did maybe at the bye.
Okay,
miscommunication is basically a term for guys not doing their job, right? Who is not doing their job? Who is it?
Rich,
give me a name. Who do you think it is?
To your original point there, Rich, in your question, I don't know that there is this witch hunt for one guy. I know that's kind of a sexy storyline to try to think of, okay, of the 15 to 16 regulars, pare that down to the 7 to 8 regulars in the secondary. Who's the one who wants to be voted off Steelers Island here? I don't know that it's quite that. I think it's more so, hey, on any given play, if you don't have all 11 doing their job, the Eagles, Chiefs, Ravens, they are going to tear you apart. 3 tight ends wide
open for touchdowns.
I think Cam Sutton has made a lot of mistakes lately. I think Minka Fitzpatrick has made a lot of mistakes lately. What does $20 million get you a year these days? So he's not playing the way they're paying him to. So I think it's a number of guys, but especially those two recently.
I at first thought maybe that it was the Cam Hayward just doing like the classic coach speak. Hey, if all 11 aren't on the same page, if 10 are and 1 isn't, you're only as strong as your weakest link. But now I do think it's Sutton.
And you think
watching the tape though, and I'll just say quickly, Chris, I'll let you go, but it is a horrible look for them to have brought back Cam Sutton, given everything we know about what he was going on with off the field and why he was cast away by the Lions, and then to bring him back and have the head coach say, well, we're so familiar with the guy, that's why we're comfortable doing this, and kind of puff his chest out and like, you don't know him like we know him. And then to have everyone rave about his football IQ, and he's the guy out there, basically, if this were like Mario Kart slipping on banana peels here. I mean, what is going on? It's a terrible look for them.
And we were sold that he was the great backup to have at outside corner.
He's so
and he's
cerebral.
like fifth string.
Yes.
Like in the back, they keep going to Torrey Trice and James Pierre, anybody but Cam Sutton.
Probably because they actually watched the Cam Sutton outside corner tape in Detroit where he was just getting cooked constantly.
Beanie Bishop, no snaps, though.
Yeah, and that's what, you wonder. I mean, you can make a change, right? I mean, what they talk about change is what personnel change can you really make?
I mean, at what point?
That's the only one that's really available to you.
What did Mike need to see to put Beanie Bishop in that game? Was he just, oh no, the Chiefs are just letting us get, way behind?
I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm just saying.
But you might want to play a guy that at least had a nose for the football and made some plays. I mean, Beanie Bishop turned around the Jets game with an interception, right? I mean, we're talking about a guy who had a nose for the ball and showed an ability to do something.
I think they went with Sutton because of the trust in him against a high-level passing offense. Well, I don't know if he was going rogue out there or didn't know his assignment, as players were alluding to. I mean, I think sometimes, even though he's one of the guys speaking up, Patrick Queen, he is the green dot, the hub of communication for the defense. I mean, it makes me wonder, is he getting the calls out to everybody correctly? I've seen him out of position too at times over these past couple weeks, both in coverage and we saw him getting stiff-armed by Derrick Henry against the Ravens, a matchup you might have again in a couple weeks. So it really is a number of guys in this secondary. Only they know behind closed doors in those meeting rooms who the biggest culprit is.
All right, we'll continue the Steelers conversation, the heated Steelers conversation coming up after the break. Stay right there. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh in for Bob Pompiani tonight, and we're going to continue with the Steelers. It's Groundhog Day for the Steelers right now. Same old story for the last 3 games. And Chris, what I'm wondering is how much we know that the players are playing the games. It's mostly their fault, but how much of an indictment is it on the head coach, Mike Tomlin?
I mean, I think it's a significant one, especially if they lose their last game to a desperate Bengals team and then go out in 1 round again in the playoffs, which I think most people would wager they will do again this year, even if they get Houston, which would be their most favorable matchup, I think, on paper. How many more times are we going to have to see this? I mean, how many times do we have to see, hey, I want to play close games, I want to let my defense win the game, I'm not going to necessarily have like some sort of visionary hotshot offensive coordinator. As an organization, and this goes even above Mike, we're allergic to the idea that we might have to endure a 5-12 season because it's going to position us to draft a young quarterback and bring them along. I'll point to one game I watched today that just drove me nuts. And it was watching the Vikings close out the Packers. Now, it was a close game, but they dominated for most of it. And just seeing Kevin O'Connell, who is not some rah-rah guy, but is a tactician, a brilliant one, who also has a great defensive coordinator, so they've got a great coaching staff. Watching him resuscitate Sam Darnold's career while I feel like the Steelers are on the treadmill to nowhere just with a slightly different cast of characters is pretty frustrating, I'm not going to lie.
Brian, how much do you blame Tomlin for this?
Well,
I mean, it's not only the same old story for the last 3 games, it's the same story for the last couple years.
It is, but I think the difference between this year and last year, Rich, I mean, going belly up against the likes of the Patriots, Colts, and Cardinals in a 3-game span was pretty much rock bottom, and they did turn to Mason Rudolph, who breathed a little bit of life into the end of that season. I think this year's more of a case of they're showing exactly who they are. I never thought they were this high on the hog Super Bowl contender. I thought they took care of business against a lot of teams. They're probably more talented.
Are they right now even one of the AFC's 7 best teams? I would say no.
I think they still are. And I think, Chris, they can still win a playoff game. I might pick them to go to Houston and beat them if that's who they get, because I think these last 3 games, as discouraging as they've been, I think they're against 3 of the best teams in the NFL, and I never put the Steelers in that category this year. I thought they were okay to good, certainly not great.
If they're just okay to good, then what is he building here?
Well, that's what's going to make the conversation you bring up even more complicated, because if they do win a playoff game, say they beat the Chargers or the Broncos at home, or they go to Baltimore or go to Houston and win a
I'll give them a lot more
game.
credit if they win a fluky game in the playoffs. That's one thing, but I mean, if it goes the way I'm describing here and they just lose out, what is the end goal here? What's the end game? Where's the vision? Because I don't see one right now. I see something that is at best outmoded and antiquated as far as we want to win with big-time defense that's also extremely expensive. And by the way, we're just going to try to, like, it wouldn't stun me if for some reason they soured on Russell Wilson. Well, Kirk Cousins will probably be out there. I mean, he's going to be cheap. He's going to be making vet. I'm serious, though. You laugh, Richie, but it's like, I think there are a lot of people out there who are going to be watching this kind of nodding along to what I'm saying, even if they don't agree with every piece of it, because the basic overall premise feels accurate.
Does defense win games in the NFL nowadays? I mean, I think you need an offense.
I don't know if it's really a choice that they're ever making that's saying, you know what, we don't really want to have a dynamic offense. We're going to have a good defense. We're going to have an average offense. I don't think that's a choice. I think you have to adjust to that, though, right? I don't know if you could say prioritize. I guess
is Arthur Smith like a big-time offensive coordinator with new ideas? No, he's somebody whose offensive philosophy absolutely fits with what they want to do as a global thing, which is shorten games, pound the football, and beat teams that way.
I think if this team went 10-7, remember the Vegas odds were 8 flat. So they're over that. If the losses were spread out more, I mean, Brian's right to the point that if you lose to Philadelphia, you lose to Kansas City, and you lose to Baltimore, you split with Baltimore, and you do it in September, October, and November, split up.
Okay, but this is what the schedule man gives you. You want to be playing your best ball, and they weren't competitive in any of this.
And they were opportunistic at the beginning of the year, and now they're not opportunistic.
This is the fifth out of 7 years now. Fifth time in 7 years they've lost 3 games in December. One of them was in November. But
so the only hell that they're unleashing is on their fans.
I mean, that is now it's crazy though, because the other 2 Decembers they got really hot. Last year they got hot after they were cold. They never have a normal December. They never do this like linear thing where they finish 10-7.
Can we hang a banner though, no matter what happens, that says outdid their Vegas win total? It just says Vegas : over.
I'll say this much though: if the stated goal from Art Rooney II and company was to have some success in the playoffs, maybe win a postseason game for the first time in 7 years, and you do that, I think that it is going to be painted as a successful season to some extent.
I know there's nuance and it's not this simple, but I said start this season winning a playoff game, success; not winning a playoff game, failure.
Brian, I'm going to go.
You know, it's not that easy, but if they do that, yes, that is a step forward, and that's probably I mean, they're not better than Kansas City. They're not better than Buffalo. I'm sorry, they weren't going to be.
You should be building a team that's going to find a way to be better than them, and I don't really see them being better than one of those teams in any kind of way that isn't fluky. You said this, like, what if they win a playoff game? Well, it's like, if that's Art's goal, then what are we even doing here?
I think that's goal for year 2024. Year 3 post-Ben, some leeway with a new quarterback, a new offensive situation.
And how many quarterbacks are they going to have ultimately started out a season with?
I get it. You don't want to keep moving the goalposts to paint something as a successful season. But if they win one this year, and then we hear in January from the top brass, well, now it's about making a run in the playoffs. Now you have a new measure by which to. The
problem is it's not a young team that you can literally build like that. I mean, if you're Jackson, whatever, you're one of the young teams. Houston, okay, you go up that way.
Their defense is
Steelers aren't really.
Their defense is built to and compensated to win now. Their defense is.
We got to run the break here, though. And that's what we got to do. Coming back, we'll talk a little bit more about the Steelers, and I want to get their take on George Pickens and also Russell Wilson specifically up next. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. George Pickens is set to make a lot of money when he becomes a free agent in a year. He's expected to play for the Steelers next year, Chris. Do you think he'll get that long-term deal here in Pittsburgh?
Oh, man.
$30 million a year.
I'm going to go with yes, because I still think that they would probably look at him and say, well, he hasn't blown up off the field or away from football at all. In fact, he's like oddly quiet unless, there's a possible burner Twitter feed that's sending out occasional pro George Pickens content. I'm going to go with yes, because I do think they realize how bad their offense looks without him and how much
he made a lot of money missing those last 3 games.
The way you would defend it, I think, even if you were talking to a Pickens skeptic who thinks he's volatile, is just you need alien-like players in this league to succeed at multiple positions, one of which is wide receiver. He is an alien, and they don't have anybody else close.
I'll tell you this, though, Chris. I mean, look around the league right now. I mean, the amount of receivers who are coming into the NFL and are alien-like, to use your word, Marvin Harrison Jr. in this class, Brian Thomas Jr. with the Jaguars, Malik Neighbors for the Giants, Brock Bowers, he's a tight end, but he's essentially an extra receiver. All those guys, 1,000 yards this year, they are churning out receivers from the college level that can, I don't want to say they're as talented as George Pickens, but they're in the same ballpark. And if you watch the young guys from Ohio State and Alabama this year, the true freshman receivers, there are going to be more guys like that, and maybe guys who don't cause you as many headaches as Pickens. So I could see it going either way with a long-term deal, but I'm going to lean towards no.
It's funny you say it, because I think the most, in terms of physical ability, more like alien-like, as you say, was Martavis Bryant. And I know you can't compare. There's a lot of different situations. I'm not going to relitigate that, however. But the Oakland Raiders came in, and so I think there's a chance that a team like the Raiders actually makes a lot of sense, comes in and just makes them an offer they can't refuse, or it kind of leaked out there in the spring. We see some sort of is George Pickens available? Put that flyer out there, and some one of those teams makes them a high draft pick offer that you almost have to take then. And
if you were the Chiefs, would you offer a high second, or would you offer a second and a third to the Steelers? Because I would, because I think if George Pickens goes to a place where he is getting the ball a lot and the quarterback knows how to get him the ball, you aren't going to hear a peep from him.
And your structure keeps a guy like that in line. I understand that. But I thought that was going to happen to some extent with Deontay Johnson in Baltimore, and that went completely the other way. So I think sometimes you can't necessarily coach or target or coax that out of a guy, because if you have a game where you aren't getting fed, well, then who knows? Maybe it starts to unravel.
Chase Claypool, again, not the same situation, not the same player at all. I get it. But remember, he had 10 touchdowns as a rookie. I mean, he was thought of very highly, and that soured, and they got a high draft pick for him, and that worked out well. And it's
why does it keep souring with wide receivers for them? That's another question.
That is a huge question, and I'll say one more thing on Pickens. I think he's really good. I've been as high on him talent-wise as anybody, but it's not like he makes every play. I mean, let's think of some of the plays this year. The focus drops, not getting both feet down.
Gaudy. They aren't that. I mean, we think of him being this star receiver. You compare him to the star receivers, there's a huge drop-off in terms of statistic production.
And Russell Wilson was really good, too, until lately. He hasn't been good. Does he deserve a contract extension? Here, we'll start with you, Brian.
Oh, boy. I think when the Steelers come to that table this offseason, if they want to, maybe you go to him and not use it as a bargaining chip per se, but an argument like, Russ, do you see what happened to these organizations that invested in these older quarterbacks? We believe in you, but look at Rodgers and the Jets. Look at Cousins and the Falcons. We got to have a little bit of trepidation going in here, so meet us in the middle. If he's willing to do that, depending on how these last couple games go, or he hopes 5 games go, maybe they do work something out, but I wouldn't break the bank for him.
I mean, the problem is he a true long-term fit? I mean, he's only going to get slower.
Not long-term, but maybe a couple years.
Okay, is he even a 2 years fit? I mean, how does he look at 37 or 38 compared to even now? I mean, the guy, I was watching an old highlight of him from like his mid-20s, and he's sprinting and beating a cornerback to the pylon for a rushing touchdown. I was like, that guy is long gone.
Ironically, he was more spry than I thought he'd be against the Chiefs. He's showing the wheels
crazy for me to say, because I know it's week 18, or about to be week 18 here, but I still think let it play out.
Oh my.
Let it play out.
I mean, you talked to us 2 months ago. It was sign Justin Fields to extension.
Yeah.
I know,
a month ago, it was give Russell Wilson $45 million.
I agree with you. But
so
you guys all have to agree. I have to go to another break. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh in for Bob Pompiani tonight. We're going to continue with college football now and the college football playoff. Penn State's in it. They look like potentially they could go far, Chris. They got to get past Boise State and maybe Notre Dame or Georgia team without their starting quarterback.
It is wild how they're playing the low brand. It's kind of hard to get excited to play SMU and Boise State, even though these are unprecedented playoff games in a playoff format. But you're still facing a guy who's approaching 3,000 yards rushing. He might get to 3,000 if they beat Penn State and win one more game there, which is kind of just absurd to think of. I don't know. I've seen the Penn State have good teams before and then lose when they play a top. And Boise, you say what you want about Boise. Boise played Oregon closer than Penn State played Oregon. This isn't a gimme in any.
James Franklin does not lose his big favorites, right?
And it would be an embarrassing loss, regardless of it. Now, is Boise top 10 in the AP poll? Because the whole top 10 thing is the trip up, right?
Okay.
If they're ranked 11th in the AP poll, then it really doesn't matter, now does it?
Boise's got the biggest of the teams remaining feast or famine defense. Like, they either give up a ton of yards per play and give up huge splashy plays, or they actually get stops and make splashy plays. So Penn State's offense does not really seem geared to take advantage of that. They're pretty conservative, close to the vest. I think Penn State probably will win this game. I flip-flopped after watching them dismantle SMU the way they did. But if this is 10-0 Boise because Genty hits a big one early, watch out, because that is going to get very ugly very quick for James Franklin if he doesn't keep his head about him and keep his team in that game.
I'm excited as anybody to see Ashton Genty. I mean, like you said, Chris Adamski, Boise State, not the biggest brand, but the fact that they have the Heisman runner-up, and if a lot of people who watched Colorado get pasted by BYU last night might be saying, oh, why wasn't Genty the Heisman? What did Travis Hunter do for them in this game? But I will say I think Penn State wins this, and maybe fairly easily, because I just think it's a huge disadvantage for a team like Boise to play teams from their conference all season. You're seeing them week in and week out. Then you go face the big boys from the Big Ten. I just think physically it's going to be a tough task. Yeah,
I like Penn State in this one too. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, don't settle for anything less than #1 Cochran's Kia's clearly better car buying experience. Enjoy exclusive clear-cut pricing where you get their most competitive offer up front. Take advantage of exceptional lease and finance rates and choose from a lineup of nearly 200 new models. Experience clearly better car buying at #1 Cochran Kia, in-store or online at cochrankia.com. All right, welcome back. Last show, 2024. Any New Year's resolutions, Brian?
I've got one for the Steelers. I think offensively, see what Justin Fields can do. Give him some snaps in this game. I'm not saying bench Russell Wilson or even give them equal playing time. Give them a series, maybe even a whole drive.
I've been saying that. Slash, go ahead, Chris.
Buck fever.
Bucko
I want
fever,
the
that's
Pirates
mine.
in 2025. That's their year. They got to take advantage of Paul Skeet.
I resolve to take Pony's phone away from him before he can send any more bad tweets.
That's another good one, too. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next year on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown.